Hey friends, welcome back to Guess What? Compliance Can Be Simple. I'm your host, Dr. Natasha Guess, founder of Guess Compliance Consulting LLC, where I work with small and mid-sized healthcare teams to build compliance systems that actually function in real environments. Now, the last episode, we established that compliance failures are almost never intentional. They are structural. They happen when organizations or practices grow and their compliance systems do not grow with them. Today, we are going inside the regulatory mindset because one of the most common mistakes I see organizations make is when they think about compliance as preparing for the wrong thing. Most practice managers, practice owners, or CAOs, when they think about regulatory readiness, they think about their policy manual. They think about whether their policies are current, whether they are documented, and whether they would hold up under scrutiny. Policies do matter. But here is what the data shows about where regulators start. They start with operational systems. And it's not because policies are irrelevant. It's because policies are only meaningful if the systems exist to carry them out. Now, if you have a policy with no operational home, it's a statement of intent. It describes what the organization intended to do, and regulators, they're not investigating your intentions. They're evaluating the evidence. So let me walk you through the 3 principles that shape how regulators think. I call them the compliance principles because once you understand them, they reframe every compliance decision you make. Principle 1 is patterns before paperwork. Regulators look at patterns of behavior within an organization, not isolated incidents. Patterns. So if an organization or a practice experiences repeated incidents involving unauthorized access to patient information, a regulator may conclude that your access controls and your oversight are inadequate. And it's not because one incident proves systemic failure, but because the pattern of incidents suggests that whatever system was supposed to prevent them is not functioning. Conversely, if an organization demonstrates consistent documentation, consistent training, consistent incident response procedures, regulators view those patterns as evidence of operational compliance. The organizations may have had the incidents. Every organization does. But the pattern around those incidents demonstrates that the organization or the practice takes its compliance obligations seriously and has systems designed to uphold them. This is why I talk about consistency. It matters more than perfection. A perfect policy that is inconsistently followed is less defensible than a simpler system that is consistently executed. Now, the next principle is systems before statements. This is the one that most directly challenges the way organizations or practices typically prepare for regulatory review. And regulators, when they're reviewing you, they typically evaluate whether your organization or your practice have implemented systems that support your policies. Now, if an organization or a practice states that patient information is protected, regulators examine how access privileges are assigned, how your vendors are evaluated, how your staff are trained, and how incidents are documented. The statement is not enough. The system behind the statement is what determines whether the organization is compliant. And those organizations or practices that rely solely on policy statements without any operational system consistently struggle during regulatory reviews. Not sometimes, consistently they struggle. And it's not because their intentions were wrong. It's because their documentation could not demonstrate that their intentions were being operationalized. Now, principle 3 is evidence before explanations. This is the principle that has the highest stakes for practices. Now, when an investigation occurs, organizations or practices frequently explain that they intended to follow procedures or they believe they were compliant. Those explanations are understandable. They are. They are often true, and they almost never change the regulatory outcome in an investigation. Regulators focus on documentation that demonstrates your compliance efforts. Training records, your incident response documentation, your vendor agreements, your policy review logs. Those are evidence. Explanations of intent are not. And that distinction matters enormously. An organization or practice that can produce a documented risk assessment, training records with completion dates, a vendor agreement review log, and a documented incident response is in a fundamentally different position than an organization that can explain what it intended but cannot prove what it actually did. Now, let me give you a number that I want you to remember, and this is important. In 2025, OCR reviewed resolution agreements from enforcement actions across the country. In 10 out of 10 of those agreements, failure to conduct a risk assessment and enterprise-wide risk assessment was cited as a core finding. Not 6 out of 10, not most of them. Every single one of them. And that tells us something important about what regulators are prioritizing. They are not asking whether a risk assessment document exists. They are asking whether the organization actually used that risk assessment to guide your operational decisions. And they're asking whether it changed something. They're asking whether it produced an actual action. Now, if you have a risk assessment that sits in a folder, that is not evidence of compliance. It is evidence that the organization knew what it was supposed to do and did not follow through. And that distinction to a regulator is significant. Now, this brings us to the 3 questions every regulator asks. The first question is, did the organization identify the risk? This means, did you conduct a formal risk analysis that actually looked at where your organization handles PHI and where your vulnerabilities exist? Not a one-time checkbox, a documented, systematic evaluation. The next question is, did the organization address the risk? And this is where most organization or practice fall short. A risk analysis sitting in a folder with no follow-through is not compliance. Regulators want to see that when a risk was identified, a decision was made and documented, the risk was remediated or mitigated or accepted with a clear rationale. Now, the third question is, did the organization monitor and maintain the response over time? This is what separates compliance as a one-time project from compliance as an ongoing monitoring operational system. The risk landscape changes. We know that. Systems change. Your vendors change. Staff roles change. A compliance operation that does not adapt to those changes is not a functioning compliance operation. Now, here is what I want you to take away from this episode. Regulators rarely expect perfection. What they expect is evidence of your oversight, and those organizations or practices that can demonstrate a structured, consistent, documented compliance efforts across all three of those questions. They are in a fundamentally more defensible position than organizations with better intentions and less documentation. Now, on the next episode, we are going to get specific about where the gaps show up. We'll talk about the 4 compliance failures that appear most consistently in small and mid-sized healthcare practices and why they are almost always predictable. You heard me, always predictable. Before I let you go, I want to make sure you know about a resource I built specifically for the practices we talk about on the show. If this episode made you realize your organization has the intentions, but not the documentation to back them up, the Guesswork Enter Your 30-Day HIPAA Compliance Template Kit was built for you. It fixes that gap. It gives you 28 done-for-you compliance documents across 7 sections, plus a 30-day implementation roadmap so you have the systems, not just the statements. The link is in the show notes. I am Dr. Natasha Guess. Thank you for listening to Guess What? Compliance can be simple. Now schedule your free compliance strategy call using the link in the show notes. I'll see you in the next episode. Until then, keep it simple, stay compliant, and protect your patients.